As an entrepreneur, we get a little romantic and we're really good at solving problems. So we think there's somebody out there. I know it. I just need to find them and they can make everything better. So that silver bullet thinking is dangerous.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show, and I am delighted to introduce you to my friend Justin Lund. Justin and I run in similar coachy circles. We believe in mentorship, and we just hit it off inside one of our common mentors. And I was just blown away by Justin's story. So Justin is a very successful businessman, but he has also had somewhat of a roller coaster experience. And so many of the people that I talk to in my community, they are afraid of that roller coaster. They're afraid of the dips. And Justin has a beautiful comeback story and some wonderful things to share. Hey, Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and dig into it with you.
I'm super pumped, super pumped. So Justin, just catch us up on where we are today. You help founders to break through those invisible ceilings, you call it, when just hard work and hustle isn't cutting it anymore. So what does that really mean?
That means that typically we reach a point where the business that we started is no longer the thing that requires our time and attention to get to the next level. So if you start because you like baking cookies, simple analogy, then your recipes and your ability to put flour and sugar and mixtures and that's what gives you that initial level of success. But if you hire 3 people and everybody wants your cookies and you're growing and you're in all these different stores all over, you're now dealing with problems and issues and demands upon you that have very little to do with your ability to bake. So that's where people make a decision, sometimes not consciously, but they need to decide whether or not, do I want to go to the next level of growth and start becoming a person that actually deals with building people, managing human resources, developing inventory management and customer service protocols and AI usage to handle chatbot support or whatever else might be part of the business, which again has very little to do with cookies. And people sometimes making those choices, more conscious sometimes than others, will often shortcut a few of the steps that I think they should take. So instead of trying to delegate and offload some of the basic work that could keep them in the kitchen longer and keep them baking, which is their sweet spot, pardon the pun, but they look at bringing in a COO right out of the gate. If I could just find my operator. And I call that unicorn hunting. You're thinking that there's this mythical creature out there that's going to come in and just make everything better. And you usually reach that point because you've had a year or two of just kind of smashing your head against the wall or that ceiling that I mentioned. You just kind of bump into that. And so that as an entrepreneur, we get a little romantic and we're really good at solving problems. So we think there's somebody out there. I know it. I just need to find them and they can make everything better. So that silver bullet thinking is dangerous.
It is dangerous. I love this conversation. It's like the shadow side of success, because if you spend 4 minutes on the internet, you're going to see people screaming from the rooftops, just do this to make money, just do this to make money. But it's a far more interesting conversation, I think, after that initial success of okay, I'm offering a product or a service that people desire, they want. Cash is starting to flow. And I remember one of the first big bumps in my own business as a coach. I started out doing high ticket private coaching. My calendar filled up beyond capacity because I didn't really have the math done about how many spots I could really take. And it robbed, my marketing time, my sales time, and I had none of the right kind of help, but I was spending so much money on the wrong kind of help for that particular challenge. I think with that first big blip in my business, which by the way, I almost tanked it, because cash is king. And if you run out of that cash flow, boy, oh boy, watch out. And that put me in a pretty flat panic then because no one had really suggested to me that there was a dark side to success, or rather that I would, that money wasn't going to solve everything, making sales wasn't going to solve everything. So, talk to me a little bit about why you're so inspired to help, service-based businesses with this shadow side of success and like help them unlock their next level of potential.
Yeah, I guess one of the main drivers that I feel called to try to share some of my experience and story is because I've gone through, I've had a couple of dark turns into the dark side myself. So maybe that's the dark side of business is kind of like my vibe, my sweet spot. But I had some trouble with substance abuse when I just got married, had a very young family, and was in sales to support going through college. And I got into drug addiction, pain pills, and so I had a habit there that was just atrocious, hard to, like, virtually impossible to kick. And it was maintaining that facade and trying to keep everything looking like it was okay and going good. And then everything came crumbling down after a couple of years of that because I couldn't sustain it and the debts were out of hand and out of whack. I ended up going to jail a couple times and then rehab for a 6-week stint. And I loved that. Because I was a fan of psychology. That's why I like sales, because I could use some of that psychology. I took psychology classes in college, but I didn't want to be a therapist or social worker or anything. That did nothing for me. But I like the idea of learning how to understand what's going on in our mind and how people think and what drives things. So sales was a good fit, but the drugs were not a good fit. Never are. But the rehab gave me tools and frameworks that I could put my thoughts through and gained leverage over myself and my thoughts and what made me tick and knowing who I was and some of these things. So after that stint, I grew a business fairly rapidly over the next couple of years, reached multi-million-dollar revenues, grew so fast that it scared the hell out of me. And I looked for people to help me where I wasn't good. Like, I'm not good with numbers. I don't really know how to do taxes. And so I brought people into my world willy-nilly, like without due diligence, without any second thought, Amanda. Okay, you can help. Sweet. Yes, I need the help. And they took advantage of me and took me to the cleaners. The business grew. The third and fourth year, it was like 30 million, 46 million, 50 something million dollars of revenue. And I mean, it was growing fast. It was big. We had almost 100 employees at one point. And the short version of that story is, as that began to wind down and we made an exit out of some of that, I had no. It was all taken from me and siphoned away through a complex series of financial schemes and shell companies that took me 4.5 years of litigation to just begin to understand where it might have gone. And I still don't know entirely all of it, but I was able to get out of that and settle that lawsuit. 4.5 years, it's all I did every day. Like 8 hours a day, I'm reading stacks of legal briefs and financial reports. Remember, I'm not good with numbers. I'm not a good numbers guy. It was a forcing function. Like, the world and the universe was saying, well, you better get good. Like, you better start figuring it out and get your head out of the sand. So I think those two experiences of just dealing with that and then having to just do whatever. Both times, both with jail and the drugs and then with the financial situation, there was the potential. With drugs, it was like right in front of my face. I could have gone to prison. With the financial stuff, there were tax returns that were falsified and had somebody wrote my signature on tax returns. And it clearly wasn't my signature. But it turns out the IRS doesn't really care. It was my business's, and therefore I was the one responsible. So
Yeah,
I
it's
had,
the ownership accountability, right? But then that means that after building a business to have 100 team members and, have millions and millions of dollars of revenue success to then have to essentially live in it. And you didn't even get to keep the business, right? Like you had
no.
to liquidate and separate from that experience and then to spend nearly 5 years just every day reliving that nightmare, my gosh. And
Yeah. It
so,
was 5 years before that. I relived in very much as minute of detail as I could put together for the next 5 years. So it was a weird time of life for sure.
very challenging. Now, you're obviously on the other side of it.
Mhm.
So what happened? Like, did you get things kind of to a place of resolution in the end, or what
To
ended
a
up
degree.
happening?
Yeah. So what I had to do is I filed different tax returns that basically said this is the best that I can do with the data that I have, and I'm going to try to go get more data. And those tax returns said that I owe the IRS millions and millions of dollars in unpaid taxes. So, and the counsel that I got at the time was you could hope that nobody ever looks, and then you just, just stay quiet and slip off. And I'm like, well, what happens if they do? What if I'm somebody? What do you mean if somebody looks? They're like, well, if you get audited, you'll probably go to prison because I mean it says their tax returns filed say very minimal income, and you know that it was tens of millions of dollars. Like that doesn't just get swept under the rug. I mean, it's going to all come back and point to you. And I'm like, but I don't have any of the money, like zero of the money I have. And that's where I had to file the returns and to just try to cooperate and work with the IRS. And they're not the easiest to cooperate and work with. You think taxes are complicated, and they're pretty clear cut when they know you owe them money. It's just pretty straightforward. So anyway, after 4.5 years, I was able to settle and get right up to the edge of going to trial, where I was able to wrap that up and conclude that and get the IRS paid with some of the settlement dollars, and not without an extraordinary amount of like just finagling and working these details. Even the IRS was
Holy.
involved in the settlement because they really wanted to make sure that they got their money. it was
Hmm.
it was a tough situation to navigate. But again, coming back to why I feel like that could be useful, because I just didn't look, Amanda. I never looked at the numbers. And people in my life after the fact were like, well, duh, if you would have paid attention. I was like, did I really miss all the signs? Man, I'm a knucklehead. What am I doing? And now working with entrepreneurs, they're not often as dumb as I was. Most of them aren't. I mean, so that's good. But one of the key things that I teach people today is if they're that ignorant, like they just want to kind of head in the sand sort of thing, then I just tell them, okay, 1.0, our first version is you're just going to set a meeting with your CPA every quarter. Once a quarter, you meet with your CPA. And something as simple, that's the simplest framework that we can come up with that gets them on the phone, because they have this misconception that I don't know. I'm here. I know nothing about numbers. To know something about numbers, I need to be up here. Like this huge, and up here they picture a CPA or somebody like a master's degree with accounting, and all these 10 years of. No, there's like steps, a lot of them that go from here to there. So by getting that, and I still do the same thing. I follow that version 1.0. I talk to my CPA. It's just like a conversation like this. So one of those a couple years ago, was I was telling him about how I was turning in a lease, and the lease was going to be due like to turn in just a few weeks. It was November, the end of November, just after Thanksgiving, and I was like, "You wouldn't believe it, man. My wife's driving this car. We're turning it in less than a month, and there's an early snow. We hadn't put on the snow tires yet, and." She slips a little bit off the road and hits a mailbox and does damage to the front, the side, the back, like every part of it, $15,000 damage. And he's like, wait, when did you say you're turning it in? So I'm telling him a story just about what happened last week. And he is like, hang on, what? When did you say you got turned in? When are you going to get a new car? I'm like, I don't know, man. I was just telling you, I was just frustrated that it costs so much money. It's going to be such a huge repair. And he's like, could you buy a car before the end of the year? Is it for your business? And I said, yeah, okay. He's like, because accelerated depreciation is still in effect and you can take it all. And he tells me about this. And so I bought a $57,000 Ford and wrote all of it off that year, took my taxable income from the highest bracket to the lowest bracket with all my deductions,
Wow.
including that truck. And if I wouldn't have talked to him, I would have turned the car in on January 10th when it was supposed to be turned in. I would have found a replacement sometime thereafter. And I would have just been with my head in the sand, paying lots more money in taxes. So those exchanges, you don't need to know what you're doing. You don't need to have a strategic agenda to talk to your CPA. We could talk just like you and I are talking, and they will pull things to have context to your life and your business that'll make a huge difference.
I love this. And, I think a lot of shame gets attached to our identity, like maybe I am dumb or maybe I'm not smart enough or I was supposed to already know or, we can assign these identity traits, if you
100%.
will, and then say like, well, what does it say about me if I don't know all the rules? Or what does it say about
Yeah.
me if I made a math error or something like that? And I'm like, Stop making it about you. One of my most empowering things I've done as I've built my business is just be dumb as possible. Meaning, like, when you sit down with a CPA, ask the dumb question, right?
For
That's what
sure.
they're
For sure.
there for. They are
Yeah.
there to know answers. And guess what? If you ask dumb questions and they're like, I don't know, and you're getting a sense of like, wait a second, like they're kind of making things up, like our human ability to perceive other humans is a really powerful tool to find out, like, is somebody trustworthy and credible and able to really lead you through a thing, or are they building a huge facade? And I really appreciate, the story and your candor and everything, because I think a lot of business owners, to your point, they have a lot of, I think some of it's cultural, as Americans, very independent. I got to do all
Yeah.
this all by myself. But again, like, kind of worrying about, I'm doing this because I couldn't hold down a day job. Like, what are you talking about, with these other requirements? But I also think that there's certain skills that good entrepreneurs generally have. And one of those things is knowing your numbers. So it's okay to be intimidated by that. And like another one would probably be being influential and being able to have great personal relationships and
Hmm.
things like that. And every one of us has to learn skills, and especially if we've never had exposure to those skills in the past. So you can make it a matter of identity, that's like a fixed mindset. I'm never going to change. Nothing's going to be different. Or you can do what you've done and just like grab those experiences and say, wait, the cost of not knowing, right? What is the cost of not knowing? That's real high. So, what if I let myself start to learn? And what if I let myself really own my knowledge and lack
Sure.
of knowledge so that I'm empowered to really make some change here?
Yeah. And I would
Yeah.
say, I don't know that I embody these traits that you're so kindly speaking of, but they've been done to me, and it's been a forcing function upon me. Like, and I would say you don't have to do it that way. You can do it what Amanda's saying. That's that's a better way to just work on the flexible growth mindset aspect of it. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of a young woman that I was talking to, just starting a business. And I gave her this prescription, like, talk to your CPA 4 times. She didn't have a CPA, and so I gave her some advice on here's how you can go look for one. I followed up with her a couple weeks later, and she said, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's for me." I'm like, "Oh no. What do you mean?" She said, "Well, they're like 250, $300 an hour, and they're just like, I think they're kind of talking down to me. They'd be like, you little girl, you don't know what you're doing." And I'm like, "All right, cut the shit. Hold on. We got to stop that right there." Okay. First of all, you didn't follow what I said to do. And second of all, how much did you pay in taxes last year? She said, "Well, like, what do you mean?" I said, "How many dollars were withheld and or what total amount paid to the state and the federal governments combined?" She said, $97,000. And I said, "You are telling me that you don't want to pay $300 an hour 4 times a year if you could cut that in half?" I mean, don't be stupid with your. And it was what you just said, Amanda. She just didn't want to feel dumb. She didn't want to feel, but she'll pay $97,000 to not feel that feeling. Like, oh, that breaks my heart. It hurts.
That is
It
an
actually hurts me.
expensive fee
Yeah.
for not
Yes.
working on our influence. And the other thing, too, is like with things like accountants, lawyers, experts, real pros, to your point, like, yeah, their fee is high, but they went to school forever. They
Mm-hmm.
they've practiced, they've earned their fee when they charge that fee. And the thing is that if you get heebie-jeebies with, and like, big shout out especially to the female entrepreneurs who kind of don't want to be made to feel even worse, of
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
like, oh, you're not good with math, oh, you're not good with this, and men too, right? Like, don't let someone else have that power over you. I don't care how much money they make. I don't care what their degrees behind their head say. If they're a jerk, they're a jerk. And there's a lot more people out there who are kind-hearted, who have great souls, who care about the success of their clients. I actually, you'd be so surprised, and I'm sure you know this, but saying out loud for the sake of the podcast, that like I had a question and I called around to a few lawyers. I got my question answered by a high like a high ranking lawyer, a well-to-do lawyer. And he
Hmm.
was like, I'm going to talk to you like you're my little sister. And here's what I would say. And the thing is at the end of the day, he wasn't the right person to help for the thing. And it actually prevented me from making a very costly decision.
Hmm.
And he didn't
Hmm.
charge me a single penny. And the
Yeah.
thing is the good ones, they know that when they serve like that, that you're going to be the
Yeah.
referral source. You're going to tell the story. Like I'm talking about it on my podcast, like right now.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
never settle for a butt head ever.
For sure. But you're touching on
Yeah.
something that's important, I think, to bring up because as entrepreneurs, you remember that old TV show MacGyver? Is that
Hmm.
have you ever seen anything? Okay. The guy could fix anything with a piece of bubble gum, duct tape, and a ballpoint pen, right? So as entrepreneurs, we have similar traits where we look at everything through this lens of, okay, how can I solve that? What can I do? Give me one of those. I'm going to put an act out. I'll just get up an hour earlier. Okay, I got this. No big deal. So that can color your choices when you start looking at professionals like this. Okay. You may talk to a butthead like you just described, but because you like to put lipstick on pigs and solve problems, and that's just a trait that the world needs more of, but you need to know yourself too. It's something I learned in rehab, right? Know thyself and to thyself be true. So the way to offset, I've got a simple playbook for this that just cuts through that noise, that taps into the energy of who you need to work with, like you just described. And the simple version is you call 10. Like, don't stop. A six is the minimum. And it's not six phone calls that you make, it's six conversations because every lawyer, every CPA will give you 30 to 60 minutes as an initial consult that's kind of like their sales pitch. And if you compare one to another to another to another six times, you will know for sure who you want to work with. But if you call one, and I did this when I started all my legal problems, I started with a lawyer, I got a recommendation, I called them, I was 6 months into it before I realized this is terrible. This is not at all what I need or who I need. And that's how I began to learn how to bring real skill. Because I'm not a lawyer, so how am I going to interview a lawyer? How am I going to interview an accountant? What do I could barely add 2 plus 2. So what am I? So those are the limiting beliefs that are below the surface. So that when I
Hmm.
call a lawyer, like this young lady I mentioned, she's calling an accountant and she's got these limiting beliefs and tries to ask a few questions. Anything is easily perceived as you are foolish. You must be dumb. So up comes the limiting beliefs. Down goes the phone, and we're like, I'm okay. I think I'm okay. I'll pay the $97,000 in taxes. It's ridiculous. All you need to make is 10 more contacts. Talk to 10 lawyers and see what, and you'll find a lawyer just like you said, because there's a few bad apples out there. I've dealt with them, but more of them than not are good apples, and they will help you. They want to support and serve you, and they realize, yeah, I'm not going to try to nickel and dime this lady for this because she may need me in like that's just good karma.
That's
And
it.
most
That's
of them are
it.
like that.
Be a pro, right? Like look for
Yeah.
pros and be a pro and professionals
Yes.
call around. I love that so much. So Justin, what's the best way for people to follow you, to connect with you after this episode?
Yeah, probably Instagram. I'm on all kind of the platforms. I think it's the same username everywhere. It's Justin Lund. So yeah, I'd love to connect with you there. And if any of this stuff resonates, I do have that playbook that I'd be happy to share. So if you just send me a DM there, professional Amanda, and that will get. I'll just send. It's a Google Doc. You don't have to opt in or log in or give me any of your blood samples or anything. I'll send you the Google Doc that I
No
use.
DNA required.
No, no. That my team uses. We all use the same thing. Like we needed a little specialty work with an accountant on one of our clients that has a special pension plan, and we're like, "Whoa, this is way outside of our scope." So we just pulled out the playbook, and she sat down and went through the calls. And I mean, it just works. It's simple, it's straightforward, but it works. It gets you results. So if that is something that anybody out there needs, I'm happy to share. No problem.
I love it. And listener, we'll make sure to have Justin's links below so that you can very easily find those and give him a follow. And hey, if you love this episode, make sure you smash that subscribe button before you move on. And if you found this conversation helpful, enlightening, encouraging, motivating, disillusioning, whatever it was for you, grab the link and share it with 3 of your friends. You know, you can text it over to them, send it over a DM, however you guys normally communicate. Just grab the link to the episode and send it on over so that they can have a listen. And hey, if it really did make a big difference, the biggest difference you can make back to us is a review. So if you leave us a honest review on wherever you're listening to, it'll help other people decide whether they want to listen to the Amanda Kaufman Show. We're going to be back with another episode very soon, but until then, make sure you do what matters.